Hello and welcome or welcome back. My name is Katie and this is By the Books. If you haven't already guessed by today's video, I'm going to be looking back at all of the books that I read this year, talking about ratings, talking about some of my favorites, maybe some of my least favorites, and doing a full year in review of everything I read this year. So the way this is going to go is I'm going to go chronologically through the books that I read this year, give star ratings, maybe go a little bit more in depth on some of the ones that I have a little bit more to say about. But mostly this is just going to be a brief overview of what I read this year, my overall thoughts, and then closing with some of my favorites and some of my least favorites. But without further ado, I've got my coffee, we've got our books, let's go ahead and get started. So starting off, first book of the year, we have Deep State by Chris Hoddy. I did not like this one. This was a very disappointing start to my year. I really thought I would because I love political thrillers, but this was just so messy, and the overall connection of the different plot points to the idea of the deep state, it didn't work. And to add insult to injury, the whole time I was reading it, I was like, yeah, there's this female protagonist that's supposed to be cool and powerful and awesome and just like so badass, but I can totally tell that a man wrote her. And there are male authors out there that can write female characters very well. Stephen King is a really great example of that, but Chris Hoddy is not one of those authors, and for all those reasons, I did not like this very much. 2 stars. Speaking of Stephen King, next we have If It Bleeds. I did give this one 2 stars. I feel like this fell into the trap of not being marketed properly. This, in my opinion, was originally marketed as a novel, when in fact it is a collection of short stories. Now, I am not someone who enjoys short story collections. I would much rather read a novel. However, when the hardcover came out, the whole blurb on the back was about If It Bleeds, which is the title story of the collection. But there are 3 other collections in there. Now, Stephen King is someone who I think does a phenomenal job with fleshing out stories when he has 300, 400, 500 pages to do it. I don't feel his greatest successes come from his short stories. That's just my personal opinion. And for that reason, I didn't love this. I have no interest in reading the other 3 stories in this collection. And I will likely not pick up another Stephen King short story collection. I know there's one coming out in 2024, but I don't know. I don't think they're for me. Moving on, we have The Overnight Guest by Heather Gudenkauf. This one I gave 3 stars. It was okay, but I really think that this was a really well done story, and it delivered when it came to like the creep factor. But again, just like If It Bleeds, I went into this thinking it was a thriller. This was marketed as a thriller, when in reality, this was more like horror suspense. And you may be thinking, well, they're like the same thing. They aren't. Here's the big difference. Thrillers, they're thrilling. Something's always happening. You're always moving forward in this story. There's always this constant movement towards figuring out what's actually going on. There's this big reveal, big twist at the end. Suspense novels are much more of like a slow burn. They are very slow paced. They keep you on the edge of your seat because they're super creepy a lot of the times. And yes, there's some sort of reveal, some sort of mystery that you're able to uncover at the end a lot of times, but that's not really what you're reading the book for. You're reading the book for that suspense, for that creep factor. And had I known that's what I was reading going in, I think I would have enjoyed this a lot more, because I love suspense, I love horror. But when you go into a novel thinking that it is a thriller and you don't get that, it's really, really hard to come out of that with a positive experience. So The Overnight Guest, 3 stars. I will be reading this author again, I think, because I really liked the way she wrote. And now that I know what to expect, I think I'll have a better time. So then next, I read The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This was one of my favorite reads of the year. I did originally give this 5 stars, but after further reflection, I bumped it down to 4, simply because I did guess the reveal at the end. And I wish I could be someone who could just sit there and enjoy a book and not see the ending coming and be able to have that shock factor every time I read a mystery or a thriller. But that's just not me. My brain is always, always, always thinking, and that makes it so that while I'm reading, it's already trying to work out what's going on. So I did guess the big reveal in this, which is kind of a bummer because I feel like that was supposed to be like a big shock, and I think that is ultimately what made this 4 stars and not 5, but that's not the book's fault. So I'm really excited to continue on with the series. I think I waited a little bit too long to pick up Hawthorne Legacy. I'm hoping to get to it in the new year. I was afraid of it putting me in another book slump, so I did not continue with the series in 2023. However, I will be looking to that in 2024. Next, we have Mysterious Ferret Styles by Agatha Christie. This is the very first book in the Hercule Poirot Mysteries collection. I feel like whenever I read an Agatha Christie book, it's usually like a 3 to 4 star experience. But after the fact, after I've finished the book, months later, I'm thinking about it, which makes her a 5-star author to me. And even though this may not have been like my favorite book of hers that I've ever read, I still feel like it was a great introduction to Hercule Poirot. And I think it still is one of those things that solidifies her as one of the greatest mystery authors of all time. So next up, we have The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was 5 stars, one of my favorite books of the entire year. At this point, this was the second Taylor Jenkins Reid book that I had read, and just wow, like she has such a way of creating characters. I fly through her stories. They are so compelling, so fun, so great. I knew this one was going to be a 5-star for me though, because there was a point in the book towards the end where I just like could not stop crying. I had happy tears, I had sad tears, I had all the emotions. I was not doing well. I would go to I've never had this happen to me before. I would open the book to continue reading. I would get a couple of sentences and then I would just start sobbing again. I could not stop. And I remember my husband looking at me going are you okay? And I was like, no, I am not okay. So I absolutely loved this book. I think about it almost every day. It is so phenomenal. If you haven't read it, which you probably have at this point, but if you haven't read it, you definitely should. 5 stars. So the next book I read was the first book in a series that truly changed my reading world. And while I read them all separately, kind of spread out throughout the beginning of the year, I'm going to talk about them all as one, and that's the Mindfuck series by S.T. Abbey. I thought this was such a great series. It was my first foray into dark romance, and yes, there's smut. We'll get that out of the way. Yes, it's in there. But the way that she developed the different characters in the story mixed with the suspense of oh my gosh, what's going to happen if this woman gets caught? What's going to happen if her FBI boyfriend finds out that she's a serial killer? And then the mystery of finding out why is she doing this? It was just so not what I expected. I was expecting to get sex. That's what I was expecting to get because I had never really read anything super graphic. And I was like, I wonder if I'll like this. But it totally changed my whole perspective on romance because it really showed me that you can have really deep, compelling stories and still have them be super sexy, still have them be super spicy and enjoyable. And I think that really changed the trajectory of the books I chose to read through the remainder of the year. I don't know if I would have gotten into romance novels had I not read this series. I do think it's really, really sad that we're never going to get anything else from this author, as she did pass away. But what she gave us was a really, really great series that I had just a phenomenal time reading. Series overall, 5 stars. So next, going in the totally opposite direction, I have Atomic Habits by James Clear. I really loved this book just because I think I read it at the right time of the year when I really wanted to make some changes and solidify some positive habits for 2023. I think what I liked most about this book is that he really shows you that it's just little tiny changes that you make throughout your day that can have a huge change, a huge effect on the way you live your life. We have to do huge drastic things in order to see huge drastic changes, and that's not necessarily true. And I think he does a really good job of showing things you can do to improve your life that aren't going to make it more difficult to live your life, if you know what I mean. So I really love this. I don't usually rate nonfiction books, but if I had to rate this one, it'd be 4.5 stars. Great one for if you're looking to form new habits in the new year. Definitely pick it up. So next up, we have The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I gave this one 2 stars. I will not say too much besides I didn't really like this. I thought it was very pretentious. I felt like the book thought way too much of itself and was trying to do way too much all the time. Main character was super unlikable. I know a lot of people loved this and I know a lot of people love this author, but just not for me. We'll probably not be picking up another book by him. So next I read Dead Dead Girls by Nikisa Afia. I was so disappointed because this book started out really, really strong and it had the potential to be phenomenal. You find out the who in the mystery about 3/4 of the way through, but the why is still very unclear until the last 2.5 pages, and it ruined everything for me. For 300 pages, I loved this book, and the ending just destroyed everything. 2 stars for me from this one. I would love to read another one of her books, but I don't want to be disappointed again, so I don't know if I'll be picking up her other one. Next, I read Snow Country by Yasunari Kawabata. I really wanted to like this because I thought the concept of the story was really interesting. I just don't think translated literature is for me. It's really hard for me to follow, and I don't want to give this book a rating because I don't think I understood it. It's one of those things where I felt like I was not smart enough to understand this book. I know a lot of people who really love translated Japanese literature, and I'd like to maybe try a different story, but for me, this just didn't land, and I don't think it's the book's fault. So I'm not going to rate this one, but I just don't think translated literature is for me. So next up is one of my favorite books of the year. This is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I have never read a Tolkien book before, but I just ate this up. I loved it so much. I cried at the end, like happy tears. I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting to kind of have to trudge through this, but I really loved it. If you are someone trying to get into classical literature and nothing really seems to work for you, I think The Hobbit would be fantastic. So 5 stars, absolutely loved it. Next up, I read The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels by India Holton. I originally gave this book 5 stars. Upon further reflection, I think it's probably more like a 4-star book, but I loved it. It was so whimsical. I read a lot of reviews that people said this was like super weird, and I guess it was a really weird book. There's like sky pirates, they fly houses. I just thought it was phenomenal and so inventive and so magical, and I think she has another book kind of like this that I want to pick up in the new year, but I absolutely loved it, devoured it, had so much fun, and this started kind of my journey into romance, as you will soon see. So next up, I have Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. Right off the bat, just 5 stars. Fantastic book. As I've said before, it is so hard to do thrillers right because it's really, really hard to execute every piece of a thriller that needs to be properly executed in order for the payoff to be there. And B.A. Paris did it expertly. It was phenomenal. The ending, my jaw was on the floor. I will read B.A. Paris again and again and again and again and again. She's phenomenal. I'm so excited to pick up another one of her books this year, and I just love this one. 5,000 stars. 5,000 stars. So next I read Lilac Girls by Martha Hall Kelly. I gave this one 3 stars because I'm so confused about how I felt about it. The writing was incredible. She really knows how to write a gripping story. However, the content of it, not my favorite. I didn't love it. I had to really push myself to finish it. And I don't know why I did that because I really didn't enjoy the reading experience, but I give it 3 stars because I can acknowledge the fact that she's a phenomenal author, but I don't think I will pick up another one of her books. So next I read Girl A by Abigail Dean. I gave this book 4 stars, but quite honestly, I can't remember what it was about. Even reading the back of the book, I don't remember. I don't know if that really warrants it still being a 4-star, but I guess in the moment I really enjoyed this, so 4 stars, but I don't remember anything about it. So now is when I start entering my year of romance, starting with The Runaway Duchess by Joanna Lowell. Joanna Lowell also wrote The Duke Undone, which I read last year, and I just loved it to pieces. I ate this story up. I thought it was so good. I love a period romance, and Joanna Lowell is like the queen of that right now, in my opinion. I don't know if she is coming out with any more books or if she has any more in her catalog, but I will be reading them whenever I find them. 5 stars, loved it. Definitely pick it up, give it a try. So next up, this one's gonna be controversial, so I'm not gonna talk too much about it, but Verity by Colleen Hoover, one of my favorites of the year, 5 stars. I loved it. I think Colleen Hoover should only write romance mystery thrillers. It was fantastic. I loved it. So next on the list is The Witch Hunter by Max Seek. This one falls into the same category as every other book I read this year that was improperly marketed. I thought this was going to be a mystery thriller. Again, more of a mystery suspense. I think publishing houses and marketing companies need to do better about marketing their books, because I think this would have been really great. But because I wasn't engaged, I mean, it was a 2-3 star book for me that I ultimately forgot everything about. So I think we need to be doing better with that. I think that's kind of like the common thread with a lot of books I didn't like. I went into it thinking it was something different than it was. And I don't think that's fair to these authors, and I think we need to be doing better. All right, next, again, not going to talk about it too long because I know people are going to be mad, but November 9th by Colleen Hoover. Everyone says this is one of the worst Colleen Hoover books. I really liked it. To be fair, I've only read the 2 Colleen Hoover books this year, Rarity and November 9. These were the only Colleen Hoover books I read, but I liked both of them. This one was a 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. So next I have Mrs. Everything by Jennifer Weiner. I really love the way that Jennifer Weiner writes. I always have to slog through her books. Like, it takes me forever to read her books, but I loved this book. 4 stars, phenomenal. But like, the reading experience isn't the best, so I don't really know what to do with that. But I will be reading another Jennifer Weiner book, I'm pretty sure, at some point. So the next book I read was The Push by Ashley Adrian. I think she's phenomenal. As a writer, I think her stories are so interesting. I feel as though this book may have benefited from the overarching problem I've been talking about throughout this whole video, the overarching issue of improperly marketing stories, because this was laid out in the literary fiction section in Barnes & Noble. But this is very much like a domestic thriller in many ways, or domestic suspense. And I went into it thinking it was being literary fiction, and it was so much more exciting and interesting than I thought it was going to be that I ended up loving it, I think, even more. While this is the one positive effect that improper marketing can have on the reading experience, I still think it's a big problem that we need to fix. But I did love this book, 4 stars. Then we have Panic by Lauren Oliver. I did not love this one. I gave it 3 stars. I think it was okay, but I think this is probably one of the last times I'll be listening to my gut instinct that tells me just because something's been made into a film or a series that it's a book I should read, because this was so not it, and it's not the only one that I read this year like that, and I think it's time to move away from that. So 3 stars, it was okay. Wouldn't necessarily recommend it though. So now we get to the part of the year that was my library girl era, and I really loved this because I didn't have to buy a single book, but I read so many phenomenal stories. I think I'm gonna do it again this year. It was over the summer this past year. I was at the library almost every single day, and I just loved it. So starting off with My Summer Darlings by May Cobb. I thought this book was phenomenal. Domestic thriller, really, really good characters. I think about this book a lot. I think May Cobb is great. I think she's a phenomenal author, and I think she really does the domestic thriller really, really well. This one was 4 stars. Then we have The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. Ashley Poston, in my eyes, can do no wrong. I really am looking forward to reading The 7-Year Slip. Dead Romantics got 5 stars from me. I absolutely loved it. The magical realism. I know it's not a lot of people's favorites, but I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. Then I read 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. Again, 5 stars, phenomenal story. I usually don't enjoy kids and books, and that usually will like ruin the book for me, but I thought her daughter was so great and such a really great addition to the story. I just loved it. I loved everything about it. 5 stars. So then I read Shipped by Angie Hockman. I know a lot of people didn't like this one, but I really enjoyed it. I gave this one 4 stars. It was a really fun summer romance. I love like the cruise ship atmosphere, the forced proximity. There wasn't as much spice in it as I had anticipated just based on what I had heard, but I still really enjoyed it. 4 stars. So next I continued my library girl summer with The Disappearing Act by Catherine Steadman. I absolutely love Catherine Steadman. I think she is a phenomenal author. Everything I read by her, I just fly through it. It's so interesting. It's so compelling. And I really, really enjoyed this one because it was a little bit different from her usual like domestic thrillers, which is really what she writes. It felt fresh and new, and I just loved it. So in the end, I ended up giving this one 5 stars. I'm not sure if that rating still remains. Maybe it's closer to like a 4.5, but I think she still deserves to be up there. 5 stars. So next I read The Hunting Wives by May Cobb. Again, 4 stars for this one. I really liked it. I didn't like it as much as My Summer Darlings, but I did really enjoy it still. I thought it was very fast paced, very fun. I think if you're looking to read a May Cobb book, summer is the only season to do it, but she's phenomenal and I would definitely recommend it. And then I read probably my favorite book of the summer, which was Something Wilder by Christina Lauren. It was the very first ever Christina Lauren book that I read, and I just ate it up. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It reminded me of that movie City Slickers, and if you haven't seen it, it's a really cute movie, really funny movie with like Billy Crystal from like the 80s or 90s, but I loved it. I loved it so much, and their writing is so good. I really was like, I don't know if Christina Lauren's gonna live up to the hype for me, but they did. They did. 5 stars. Fantastic. Then I read Good Girl Complex by Elle Kennedy. Had never read an Elle Kennedy book before, but I ate this one up. This one was a 4 star for me. I absolutely loved the storyline. I thought the spice was really good. I loved the setting of the small island town. I just loved it. Ate it up. So good. 4 stars. I then read Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I think of the Taylor Jenkins Reid books that I had read, this one was my least favorite, but I still really liked it. I know a lot of people don't like Malibu Rising. I think I have the added benefit of being from California and spending a lot of my summers up in Malibu, so it was very cool to kind of see things that I recognized represented in that book. I thought that was really awesome. And I think most people are like that. If someone's writing about a town that you live in or a place that you're from and they're writing it very authentically, I think it's really easy to be more drawn to that story. So I really liked it. I did give it 4 stars though. Not my favorite Taylor Jenkins Reid, but still really good. So next I read The Royals Next Door by Karina Hale. I don't know if there's a sequel to this, but if there is, I am picking it up this summer. I loved this. I thought it was so fun. I loved the fact that it wasn't a romance between like the royalty and the girl who lived next door. It was between like the bodyguard. I thought that was really cute. I really enjoyed it. And like I said, I will be picking up a sequel if there is one. I think there is one. So we'll see this year. Then, taking a break from the library and from fiction in general, I read How Are You Really by Jenna Kutcher. I liked this. I think I'm past the point in my life of connecting to a book like this, but there were some things that I really gravitated towards. Again, I don't really rate books like this, but I think if you're in your early 20s and you're still trying to like find yourself, figure life out, I think this is a really good book to read. So definitely would recommend, but it just wasn't for me. I'm kind of past that point in my life. So give it a read if you would like. It's still a really great nonfiction book to kind of help you figure things out. So next I read Arsenic and Adobo by Mia P. Manansala. I absolutely ate this book up, no pun intended. I had never read a cozy mystery before. This was my first one and I just loved it. I thought it was so fun. And yes, there's like murder, but it's not the murder I'm used to. The murder I'm used to with traditional thrillers and mysteries. It was fun. I loved it. I had a great time. I ended up getting her second book called Homicide in Hollow Hollow, and I'm really excited to read that one this year. But I loved it. I had so much fun. 5 stars. So then I read a literary fiction called Lucky by Marissa Stapley. I don't know. I'm just like not a literary fiction girly. It made me really sad for the most part. But I did give it 4 stars because I really thought it was written well, and I just think literary fiction is not my thing. I think I can definitely see a book for what it is and acknowledge that it's written well, but still not enjoy it. So that's kind of what this one was for me. But if you're a literary fiction person, this is really well written, and I think you'd probably really like it. So 4 stars. Next up, we have Blame It on the Brontes. I loved this book. I don't usually remember a whole lot about romance books. They all kind of mesh together unless they have a lasting effect on me, and this one totally did. I picked it up because I'm a big fan of Wuthering Heights and Emily Bronte as a whole, and so when I saw that this book referenced the Brontes in different ways, I was like, I'm gonna love that, and I did. I predicted correctly. I did love it. This one was a 4 stars for me. It was just a really fun romance. Even if you're not into the Brontes, I think you would still enjoy this, but that's originally why I picked it up, and I absolutely loved it. So the next book I read was another cozy mystery called Cold Brew Corpse by Tara Lush. I really enjoyed this one. It's super cute. The setting is on this beach in Florida where everything's kind of themed after Dante's Inferno. She works at this owns this coffee store rather, called Purgatory, and I just loved every bit of this. It was so cute and so kitschy and so fun, and I think it's the reason why I've gotten so into cozy mysteries lately and why I'm so excited to read more in this upcoming year. I just love this. I don't know what it was about it. Maybe just like the kitschiness, the cuteness, the corniness. I loved it. And yes, again, there's murder, but it's not the murder I'm used to. It's not like fun murder. Murder is not fun, but it's just the story is a lot more relaxed. There's a little bit of romance in it. I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars, and there is an entire series dedicated to this setting and this character, and I think I'm gonna pick them up this year. So look for that in the summer. So following that, my sister lent me We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I enjoyed this one, but again, same kind of vibe as the Inheritance games. I did kind of figure out what was going on, and I think had I not figured it out, I would have enjoyed it more. This one got 3 stars for me, but I feel like this was the most YA feeling book I read from the YA genre this year. Like, you can tell when a book is YA. There are certain books in the YA genre that truthfully are more like young adult, as in like early 20s, and then there are the YA novels that are more for like teenagers, like 13, 14-year-olds. This one definitely felt more like the latter. But I still enjoyed it. I can still enjoy a book like that. I just didn't, I think, get the same experience as I would have had I not been able to kind of guess what was going on the whole time. There's the sequel called Family of Liars. I probably won't pick it up just because I didn't have the greatest experience with this one, but I do think if you are really into YA and you like mystery, this is a really good one. Next up, I read How to Survive Your Murder by Danielle Valentine. I gave this one 4 stars. This is a YA mystery. I really loved it. There was a time travel element I wasn't expecting. I actually was recommended this by one of my students who is a very avid reader, and I really actually enjoyed this. I wasn't quite sure about it because the cover is a bit juvenile looking, but I thought it was a really great story. And I think it's a really great introduction to mystery and thriller for teenagers. And I mean, it was just fun as an adult to read it. So 4 stars, I really loved this one. So the next book that I read was The Chain by Adrienne McKinty. And if you haven't heard enough in this video, the biggest problem with this was that it was marketed as a thriller. This book was not a thriller. This book was a mystery, a very slow-paced mystery. And I cannot belabor the point enough that when you market something as fast-paced, exciting, constantly building to a huge reveal, a huge plot twist, and that's not what you get, it does ruin the reading experience. Now, I do have other books by Adrienne McKinty that I am going to read this year, and now that I know what to expect, I think I will have hopefully better reading experiences, because none of these books that I have talked about are bad necessarily. I just personally didn't know what I was getting into when I started reading them. I think this could have been a really, really fun, engaging read. But unfortunately, because I was expecting something totally different, it was really only like 3 stars, when I think that a story like this deserved more. So next up, I read The Bromance Book Club by Lyssa Kay Adams. I know I've talked about this before, but I just loved this. I ate it up. She is one of my favorite authors at this point in time because I just think she does such a great job of writing romance, writing banter, writing compelling male characters as well as female characters. I think that's something that we're really lacking in the romance industry, is really well-developed male characters. I think she does a really great job of showing that side of romance, and I just loved it. I ate it up. A+, 5 stars, 5,000 stars. I loved it. Then I read one of my favorite books of the year, Set on You by Amy Lee, which is about a plus-size fitness influencer who meets this guy at the gym, and it's about how their lives kind of intertwine and the romance that develops out of that. I ate this book up. I loved it so much. I'm really excited because my husband got me X's and O's, which is her other book, for Christmas. I'm so excited to read it. She's become one of my favorite authors, and I'm just so excited to read it and continue to read more by her because I absolutely love this one. This one was a 5 stars for me. So next I read Blood Sugar by Sasha Rothschild. It was a very weird book. I gave it 4 stars. I don't really remember what I read. Like, I know what happened, but I don't remember what I read. It's kind of like a fever dream, but I enjoyed it. It was kind of like a weird psychedelic experience, even though maybe that wasn't the intent. I don't know if I was just reading it out in the sun for too long, but I loved it. 4 stars. So then the very last library book that I read of the year was Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. I really liked this one. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it because I wasn't really sold on the premise, and I'd heard so many mixed reviews, but I thought it was super cute. I gave this one 4 stars. I thought looking at someone who has a chronic illness was really interesting, and I think Talia Hibbert handled that really, really well. So all in all, I don't know if I would pick up the rest of the books because they don't really seem like my cup of tea, but Get a Life, Chloe Brown was definitely solid. 4 stars. Next, I read Halloween Party by Agatha Christie. I read this after we watched A Haunting in Venice, which was the new film adaptation that was allegedly based on this. I don't quite know. It's a very loose adaptation, let's just say that. I really enjoyed this story. I thought it was so interesting and so inventive and so compelling. And it's one of my favorite Hercule Poirot mysteries I've read. Honestly, more than Murder on the Orient Express, I think. I just loved this one. It's super dark. It's super creepy. It's fantastic. If you're looking for a really, really strong Hercule Poirot mystery to pick up around Halloween, just in the fall in general, this is it. This is the one. 5 stars. So next up, I read The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. I loved this book. I loved the dark academia vibe. I love the way that he always includes some sort of Greek mythology into whatever he's writing. I just think it's a fun time. It's a great time. I'm really looking forward to his book coming out this year called The Fury. And I really did enjoy The Silent Patient as well. I thought that was a fantastic book. He's slowly becoming one of my favorite authors, but this one was a 5 star for me. I had such a great time. I loved it. Loved it, loved it. Next up, I have it is my favorite book of the year, and that is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. When I picked up this book, I was very reluctant to read it. My husband was telling me, you have to read it before we see the movie, you have to. And I mean, it's thick, it's 500 pages. I was not really into it, but I was like, you know what, if we're gonna go see the movie, I do have to read it. The way I just devoured the story, I thought it was so well done. The character of Coriolanus Snow is so complex, and she did such a phenomenal job of conveying that and showing that not only is Coriolanus Snow complex, but that the world of Panem and the Hunger Games is also complex. There's nothing about this I didn't love. I will say, if you want to engage in this story, read the book. The movie was fine. It was a fine adaptation. It's not the book though. The book was phenomenal. 5 freaking stars. Amazing. 6 stars, 12 stars, 100,000 stars. #1 book of the year, by far. Now getting into my last reads of the year, I read Confessions by Kanae Minato. This was another translated work. I understood more what was going on than Snow Country, but I did not like this one very much. I thought it was kind of weird. This one was like a 2 star for me. Again, marketed as a thriller in my Barnes & Noble, not a thriller, a dark literary fiction. Like that's what I would probably categorize it as, is a dark literary fiction. I think I still wouldn't have enjoyed it though. I can't really blame it on the marketing for this one. I still don't think I would have enjoyed it had I known what it was truly supposed to be. So 2 stars. Not my favorite, but they can't all be winners. So then I started the Addicted Calloway series with Addicted to You by Krista and Rebecca Ritchie. I really enjoyed this. I wasn't sure if I would. There is quite a lot of sex in here, and I will say at times it became a little bit much. I think sex scenes in books, the spicy scenes in books, are best when they're used sparingly. And I think it kind of overdoes it. But again, like, she's a sex addict. It kind of has to be like that. I understand that. But I am really interested to read Ricochet and see kind of what that's all about. But I like this one. This one was like a 4 star for me. So coming up on the last 3 books of the year, I read the book I have not been able to stop talking about for the past, month and a half. And that is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. I have never read a fantasy book, like a true fantasy book before. I mean, I read Y2K fantasy, like Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, but this is very different. And I loved this. Legendary is on my list of books I want to read in January because I'm just so desperate to continue on with this story. But I loved Caraval. 5 stars. It got me out of my reading slump. One of my favorites of the year. phenomenal. So then around Thanksgiving, I read The Family Game by Catherine Steadman. I absolutely loved this one. I mean, I love everything Catherine Steadman does. She's phenomenal. She's a great domestic thriller author. And this one actually kind of caught me off guard a little bit with the twist. I thought it was really fun too because it actually takes place during Thanksgiving, which I did not realize until I started reading. So that was a fun little added bonus, but I really enjoyed it. I loved it. 5 stars. She can do no wrong. So then finally I read Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. I think had I not figured out the twist, this probably would have been a 4-star book, 4 or 5 stars. Because I was able to figure it out, it was 3 stars. It took away the entire like suspense of the story because everything that happened, I was like, yeah, no, that totally makes sense because this is what's gonna happen. Yeah, no, this is totally what's gonna happen. Like that was the entire time. And I was kind of bummed about it because within like the first 2 chapters, I figured it out. And that's not just me. I've heard a lot of people say that they figured it out really quickly. So I want to give this author another shot because she's really, really famous and she's written a lot of books. So I would imagine not all of her books can be like this if she's that popular, but I don't know, stranger things have happened. So we'll see. I do kind of want to give her another shot. If you have any recommendations of good books by Lisa Jewell that maybe aren't as obvious, let me know. But I still really can admire her as an author because she is really, really good at the craft of writing. I just felt like maybe this story was a little too obvious for me, for like my taste. So 3 stars, but I'm not done with this author yet, I don't think. So that is it. Those are the 58 books that I read in 2023. I will be doing a reading sprint through to the end of the year to see how many of those romance novels I picked up for the holidays I can get through, but these are the big ones. These are the ones that got me through to the end of 2023. I'm so excited for 2024 and some of the books that are coming out. I'm excited to read new books, read new authors, make new reading goals, and to just go along on this reading journey together. Look out for those videos as they come in the new year for January TBRs and book hauls. And I hope everybody has a fantastic, wonderful, happy, healthy new year. And I will see you all in 2024.